Clint Eastwood was in the middle of the most expensive scene of Unforgiven when someone whispered something in his ear that made him stop the entire $30 million production. What happened next left the crew of 200 people in tears. It was August 1992 in the remote plains of Alberta, Canada, standing in for 1880s Wyoming. The production of Unforgiven was already over budget and behind schedule. Clint was shooting the climactic saloon shootout scene. The moment his character, William Money, walks into the bar to face his demons, 50 extras, elaborate lighting setups, and a Hollywood budget ticking away at $50,000 per hour. Clint was positioned at the saloon doors, about to deliver one of cinema's most iconic lines, when his assistant director, Sarah Chen, approached him with an unusual urgency in her eyes. What nobody on that set knew was that just 3 miles away, in a children's hospital in Calgary, a 9-year-old boy named Michael Torres was fighting a battle he was destined to lose. Michael had been diagnosed with an aggressive form of brain cancer 14 months earlier. His parents, Carmen and Robert Torres, had watched helplessly as their energetic cowboy-obsessed son transformed into a frail child who could barely lift his head from the pillow. The tumor was inoperable. The chemotherapy had failed. 3 different oncologists had delivered the same verdict. Michael had at most 48 hours to live. But Michael had one wish that consumed his final days. He wanted to see a real Western being made. Not on television, not in photographs, but in person. He wanted to see cowboys and gunfighters and saloon doors, just like in the Clint Eastwood movies his grandfather had shown him, before the cancer took away his ability to focus on screens. Carmen Torres was a woman who had learned to accept the unacceptable. She'd accepted the diagnosis, accepted the failed treatments, accepted the hospice care. But watching her son's final wish slip away because of insurance limitations and hospital protocols broke something inside her that all the medical tragedy couldn't touch. The Unforgiven production had been filming near Calgary for 6 weeks. Michael knew this because his hospital room window overlooked the distant plains where occasional filming trucks passed by. On good days, when the pain medication worked, he would sit by that window and imagine himself there, wearing a cowboy hat, watching Clint Eastwood draw his gun. Carmen had tried everything within the system. She'd called the production company. They said security protocols didn't allow visitors. She'd contacted the hospital social worker. They said Michael was too unstable to travel even 3 miles. She'd written letters to the studio. They disappeared into the void of corporate bureaucracy. On what doctors told her would be Michael's last morning, Carmen Torres made a decision that would have seemed insane to anyone who hadn't watched their child dying. She walked away from Michael's hospital room, drove to the film set, and talked her way past 2 security checkpoints by claiming to be a local newspaper reporter. When she reached the edge of the set, she saw something that made her heart both soar and break. Clint Eastwood himself, 50 yards away, in full costume, preparing for a scene. Carmen didn't have a plan beyond desperation. She pushed through the gathered crew members, past the stunned assistant directors, past the security guards who were too surprised to immediately react. She made it within 20 feet of Clint before hands grabbed her arms. "Mr. Eastwood!" she shouted, her voice cracking with the weight of every sleepless night, every futile treatment, every prayer that went unanswered. "Please, my son is dying in a hospital 3 miles from here. He just wants to see a real Western. He has hours left." The set froze. 200 people stopped what they were doing. Clint, who had been reviewing his blocking with the cinematographer, turned slowly to look at this woman being held by security guards, tears streaming down her face. "Ma'am," Clint said quietly, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent set, "let her go." The security guards released Carmen's arms but stayed close. Clint walked toward her, his spurs clicking against the wooden set pieces, his weathered face unreadable beneath the dusty cowboy hat. "Tell me about your son," Clint said simply. Carmen explained through tears. Michael Torres, 9 years old, brain cancer, loved Westerns more than anything in the world. 48 hours, maybe less, 3 miles away, too sick to travel, no one would help. Last chance. Clint listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. The entire crew waited, watching their director and star process what he'd just heard. Then Clint turned to his assistant director. "Sarah, how much is this scene costing us per hour?" Sarah Chen consulted her clipboard. "About 50,000, Clint. We've got the extras, the lighting, the... How much would it cost to shut down for 4 hours?" Sarah's eyes widened. 200,000 minimum. But Clint, we're already over budget, and the studio... "I didn't ask about the studio," Clint interrupted, his voice still quiet but carrying an unmistakable finality. "I asked how much it costs." He turned to his producer, David Webb, who had rushed over when he heard the commotion. "David, call the hospital. Tell them we're bringing a film set to a dying boy. Whatever equipment they need, whatever medical staff, I don't care. Make it happen." David opened his mouth to protest, saw the look in Clint's eyes, and reached for his phone instead. "And David," Clint added, "tell them we're bringing the whole damn production. Cameras, costumes, horses, everything. If this boy wants to see a Western being made, he's going to see one." What happened over the next 3 hours would become legendary in Hollywood circles, though most people outside the industry would never hear about it. Clint didn't just bring cameras to the hospital, he transformed an entire wing of the children's cancer ward into a Western film set. The hospital initially refused, citing sterility protocols and patient safety. Clint personally called the hospital administrator and said 6 words. "Then I'm bringing the boy here." Within 90 minutes, equipment trucks were pulling up to Calgary Children's Hospital. Grips and electricians worked with hospital engineers to safely set up lighting that wouldn't interfere with medical equipment. The hospital's largest common area, normally used for physical therapy, became a makeshift saloon set. Michael Torres, barely conscious in his room, had no idea any of this was happening. His parents had been asked to keep him calm and comfortable while arrangements were being made. Carmen didn't dare hope, didn't dare believe that Clint Eastwood was actually doing this. When everything was ready, Clint himself walked into Michael's hospital room. The boy was small for 9 years old, made smaller by months of illness. His head was wrapped in bandages from the latest failed attempt to relieve pressure on his brain. His eyes, when they opened, were clouded with medication and pain. "Michael," Clint said softly, sitting on the edge of the hospital bed. "My name's Clint. I heard you wanted to see a Western." Michael's eyes focused slowly on the man in the dusty cowboy costume sitting next to him. For a moment, he didn't react. Then, with agonizing slowness, recognition dawned on his face. "You're..." Michael's voice was barely a whisper. "You're the man with no name." Clint smiled. "Sometimes. Today, I'm William Money. And today, you're going to help me finish my movie." "I can't," Michael whispered. "I can't even get out of bed." "That's okay," Clint said. "The movie's coming to you. But I need your help with something. I've been having trouble with a scene, and I think maybe you know more about Westerns than my fancy Hollywood crew. Would you be my advisor for a few hours?" Something flickered in Michael's eyes that his parents hadn't seen in weeks. Interest. "Really?" the boy asked. "Really," Clint confirmed. "But here's the deal. You have to be honest with me. If I'm doing something wrong, you tell me. If the scene doesn't look like a real Western, you speak up. Think you can do that?" Michael nodded, the smallest movement of his head. "Good," Clint said, "because I've got a whole crew downstairs waiting to see if a 9-year-old kid knows more about Westerns than they do. Want to prove them wrong?" 20 minutes later, Michael Torres was being carefully wheeled on his hospital bed into the converted common area. His parents walked alongside him, tears streaming down their faces as they saw what Clint had created. The room had been transformed. Wooden panels created the facade of a Western saloon. Lighting created the illusion of dusty sunlight streaming through windows. 3 cameras were positioned at different angles. And, standing in full costume, looking exactly like they'd stepped out of 1880, were Clint Eastwood and 6 other actors from the film. But the most incredible thing was the director's chair positioned right next to the cameras. It had Michael's name written on the back in the same style as Clint's own chair. "Michael," Clint said, standing next to the boy's bed. "I'm going to shoot this scene 3 different ways. After each take, you're going to tell me which one looked most like a real Western. The one you pick is the one that goes in the movie. That makes you the most important person here. Understand?" Michael nodded, his eyes wide despite his obvious exhaustion. "Everyone," Clint said, addressing his crew. "I want you to meet Michael Torres, our advisor for this scene. Michael is the expert here. When he talks, we listen. Then, something extraordinary happened. The entire crew, grips, camera operators, actors, producers, all 200 people who had traveled to the hospital, applauded. Not polite, obligatory applause, but genuine, emotional applause for a dying 9-year-old who was about to tell Clint Eastwood how to make a Western. Clint performed the scene 3 times. It was a simple moment from the film, his character walking through saloon doors, scanning the room, hand hovering near his gun. Each take, he changed something subtle, the way he pushed the doors, the angle of his hat, the intensity of his stare. After each take, Clint walked over to Michael's bed. "Well, what did you think?" The first time, Michael was too overwhelmed to speak. The second time, he whispered, "The hat was wrong. Real cowboys wore them lower, to keep the sun out." Clint adjusted his hat. "Like this?" "Yes," Michael said, his voice slightly stronger. For the third take, Clint wore the hat exactly as Michael had directed. When he finished, he looked at the boy. "Better?" Michael smiled, the first real smile his parents had seen in 3 months. "That's perfect. That's exactly right." "Then that's the take we're using," Clint announced to his crew. Michael called it. "Everyone good with that?" The crew burst into applause again. Michael, despite his pain and exhaustion, was beaming. But Clint wasn't finished. "Michael, I need one more thing from you. In this scene, William Money is scared. He's walking into that saloon knowing he might die, but he's doing it anyway because it's the right thing to do. You understand being scared, but doing things anyway?" Michael nodded slowly. "I thought you might," Clint said. "So here's what I want to do. I want you to be in this scene with me, not in the shot, the camera won't see you. But I want to perform this scene for you one more time, just the 2 of us. The crew will step back. It'll be just me, walking through those doors. And you, watching. And I'm going to be William Money, but I'm going to think about you the whole time, about how brave you are. Because William Money isn't half as brave as Michael Torres. Deal?" "Deal," Michael whispered. Clint cleared the area in front of the saloon doors, leaving just Michael's bed positioned in the center. The crew stepped back into the shadows. The cameras weren't rolling. This wasn't for the movie. This was for a dying 9-year-old boy. Clint walked through those saloon doors one more time, but this version was different. He moved slower. His eyes found Michael immediately, and as he walked forward, he wasn't William Money anymore. He was Clint Eastwood, cinema legend, and he was performing for an audience of 1. When he reached Michael's bed, he knelt down, took off his cowboy hat, and placed it on Michael's head. "That's yours now," Clint said. "Real cowboys pass their hats to the next generation. You're a real cowboy now, Michael." Michael, wearing Clint Eastwood's hat from Unforgiven, smiled through tears and exhaustion. "Can I tell you something?" Michael whispered. "Anything," Clint said. "I'm not scared anymore." 4 hours after Clint Eastwood stopped a $30 million production, he returned to the actual film set. The crew, who had witnessed everything, worked through the night to make up for lost time. Nobody complained. Nobody mentioned the cost. They'd all seen something more valuable than any movie. Here's the part of the story that nobody saw coming. Michael Torres didn't die in 48 hours. Something about that afternoon, whether it was the excitement, the purpose, the feeling of being valued despite his illness, or just the inexplicable power of having a dream fulfilled, gave Michael a surge of strength that baffled his doctors. He lived for 4 more months. 4 months that shouldn't have been possible, according to medical science. 4 months where he watched Unforgiven being edited, received weekly video messages from Clint checking on his cowboy advisor, and wore that hat every single day. When Unforgiven premiered, there was a private screening for Michael in his hospital room. He was too weak to go to the theater, but Clint arranged for a professional projectionist and sound system to be set up in the children's ward. Michael watched the scene he'd advised on. He saw the hat tilted exactly as he'd directed. In the credits, in small letters that most people missed, it read, "Special thanks to Michael Torres, Western Advisor." When Michael finally passed away in December 1992, he was buried wearing Clint Eastwood's cowboy hat from Unforgiven. At the funeral, Carmen and Robert Torres received a letter from Clint. It read, Michael taught me something about directing that no film school ever could. He taught me that every scene matters because you never know who's watching, and you never know whose life might be changed by getting it exactly right. He was the best advisor I ever had. He made my movie better. He made me better. The experience changed how Clint Eastwood approached filmmaking forever. From that day forward, he established a policy on all his productions. If a sick child wants to visit the set, production stops. No exceptions, no budget considerations. Some things matter more than movies. Over the next 3 decades, Clint's sets welcomed hundreds of sick children, not with the same elaborate production Michael received. That remained unique, but with genuine welcome, time, and attention. Other directors in Hollywood heard about the policy and adopted it. Today, most major productions have similar protocols, though few people know they started, because Clint Eastwood once stopped a $30 million movie for a dying 9-year-old. In 2000, Carmen and Robert Torres established the Michael Torres Foundation, which arranges set visits for terminally ill children who love movies. Clint Eastwood was the first donor and remains on the board of directors. The foundation's motto, taken from what Clint said that day in August 1992, is, "Some things matter more than movies." The foundation has arranged over 5,000 set visits and created memories for children and families facing impossible situations. Every child who visits a set through the foundation receives a cowboy hat, a reminder of Michael and the legend who stopped everything to make a little boy feel valued in his final days. Unforgiven went on to win 4 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director for Clint Eastwood. In his acceptance speech, Clint held up his Oscar and said something that confused most of the audience, but meant everything to those who knew. "This belongs to Michael. He told me how to do it right." The story of Clint Eastwood and Michael Torres reminds us that greatness isn't measured in box office numbers or critical acclaim. It's measured in moments when someone with power chooses to use it for someone powerless, when someone with a schedule chooses to stop the clock for someone whose time is running out. Clint could have sent an autograph. He could have promised a set visit when things calmed down. He could have done what 100 other celebrities might have done, offered sympathies but prioritized the production. Instead, he brought a $30 million Hollywood production to a hospital room because a 9-year-old boy wanted to see a Western. And in doing so, he proved that the real heroes aren't the characters on screen. They're the people who understand that behind every face in every crowd is a story that matters more than any script. Today, visitors to the Unforgiven exhibit at the Western Heritage Museum in Los Angeles can see many props from the film. But the most meaningful item isn't Clint's gun or costume. It's a small plaque that reads, "In memory of Michael Torres, the best Western advisor in Hollywood. Some things matter more than movies." Every person who sees that plaque asks about the story behind it. And when they hear about the day Clint Eastwood stopped a major production for a dying child, something changes in how they think about success, priorities, and what it means to be truly legendary. If this story of compassion and courage moved you, subscribe and hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that humanity matters more than Hollywood. Have you ever witnessed someone stopping everything to help another person? Share your story in the comments and ring that notification bell for more true stories about the real heroes behind cinema's biggest legends.